Hi, I'm ThriceRisen.
And I'm Jacob.
And today we are here to talk about spoilers.
Specifically, War of the Spark spoilers.
Using Mythic Spoiler for all our spoilers. We're going to look at the cards, we're going to talk about the lore of this set, because you really can't do one or the other.
Every Magic Hat set has lore. This one just seems to have more.
More lore. It's... God, we spent about 10 minutes before rolling this camera because we don't know where to begin. Do we talk about the cards and then the lore? Do we talk about the lore and then the cards? Because, if you do one or the other, you're going to trip over each other constantly, because in this set, more so than I think any other set in Magic history, the cards and the lore are so deeply intertwined.
Right, yeah. I mean, they even had to, at the bottom of the cards this time around, put, what act a card was happening in, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, just because, the story is not only there, but it's sequential.
Yeah, and, you can see it just written plain straight on these cards here. You have Gideon Blackblade wielding the Blackblade with a certain figure limbed behind him up there. We have Jace. Jace is always wielding mysteries. There's not a whole lot going on in that card. Liliana, Dreadhorde General. What's that about? The Dreadhorde. Nissa shaking the world. And it's not just because of her fine feminine curves. We have this guy, Teo the Shield Mage. What's that about? Or Kazmina. Davriel. Sarkin is masterless. Okay. Vivian is kind of Vivian. We got that. She has a grudge against Bolas, if you're familiar with her lore at all.
But it's interesting to see, I don't want to say balance, but the almost the juxtaposition between characters we've known for 8 or 9 years versus characters we're just being introduced to. If this were a movie, fitting this many characters on there and having them each get enough screen time would be ridiculous.
It would be nigh impossible. Even the Avengers, they had to build up to that many characters. And this set kind of is the Avengers of the... I almost said Marvel, then I almost said Star Wars, and then I realized this is Magic the Gathering, because the year is 2019, if you're watching this in the future. So we have War of the Spark coming out, we have Avengers Endgame coming out, and then we have the last part of the new Star Wars trilogy coming out in December.
Rise of the Skywalker.
It is kind of just a crazy time for these huge climactic finales and these huge villains. Star Wars has Palpatine, spoilers. Endgame has Thanos, slightly less spoilers. And War of the Spark has Nicol Bolas. Now, the first thing you'll really notice looking at this is there are 10 Planeswalkers in frame here. And that's not even all of them. One of the distinguishing things about War of the Spark is that there are Planeswalkers in every single set. Or
pack?
Every pack. Yeah. There's Planeswalkers in every set, normally, but there are Planeswalkers in every pack. And some of them are uncommon and only have minus abilities. Some of them are rare, and then some of them are mythic. But unique to this set, all of the Planeswalkers have a static ability, which is, I think, amazing value for a Planeswalker to have.
Right, because it rewards you not just for when you activate their loyalty ability, but it rewards you just for simply having paid the mana cost of the walker.
And some of them dovetail into each other very, very nicely. Starting off here with Gideon, as long as it's your turn, Gideon Blackblade is a 4/4 human soldier creature with indestructible that is still a Planeswalker, and you prevent all damage that would be dealt to him during your turn. So you don't have to use a plus or a 0 or whatever ability that Gideon would have had in the past. He's just always a creature as long as it's your turn. You don't have to do anything.
Right.
So you can attack with him and still use his abilities to do other things.
Now, we've seen this kind of ability on Gideon's in the past. Honestly, though, the fact that it's kind of always on really makes it stand kind of head and shoulders above the other abilities of its type.
So, and I think his first ability is kind of balanced. Up to one other target creature gets your choice of a host of keywords, and you can exile permanents with him. I'm actually, in looking at these cards, these planeswalkers, I am far less interested in what their actual abilities do than I am in what their static abilities do, because the static abilities on most of them are so good. Actually, I won't even say most of them. All of them are good. It just depends on what type of deck you're building.
Right, and I feel like this is one of my biggest praises for this set. I really feel like they did a fantastic job of putting the color wheel on display and printing powerful enough cards to reinforce why each color is the best at what it does.
Yeah, so like Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. If you would draw a card while your library has no cards in it, you win the game instead. He has a Laboratory Maniac effect, and he says target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard, and then you draw a card. So you could draw a card and mill someone else for 2, or you could just get 3 closer to that win condition.
Exactly, and he makes it so that if you've gone through the work of milling yourself out, he has that +1 to then push you over the edge and win the game, so that they don't, kill him or something like that on their turn or what have you.
Kind of scrolling through, again, like I said, I'm less focused on what the actual cards do, largely. I'm more focused on their static effect. Liliana, Dreadhorde General, segueing into the lore ever so slightly, Nicol Bolas is enacting his grand scheme. He's gathered all the planeswalkers that he can on Ravnica by invading with the Dreadhorde, the skeletal army of Eternals that he gathered from Amonkhet, and he's using the Immortal Sun that he got from Ixalan to trap the planeswalkers on Ravnica after they arrive, because he wants to harvest their sparks and turn it into a giant planeswalker smoothie that will allegedly grant him godlike power.
Right, and one of his primary goals, per the Magic the Gathering official video, was to cast the Elder spell, which it says he found in the annals of Dominarian history. And for those unfamiliar, Dominaria is the original plane of Magic the Gathering, where some of the most powerful things and artifacts come from.
Yeah, which I'm really curious. A slight segue to the story from this story, even. Karn, the Planeswalker Karn, the Silver Golem, is still walking around with a Silex in a bag. And if that's not a Chekhov's gun waiting to go off at some point, I don't know what is. Because he's carrying around, presumably, there's been some argument as to whether it's the Golgothian Silex. There's some people that say it was destroyed. Karn, from what I recall, I read the story some time ago, he seemed to think it was at least a Silex, if not the Golgothian Silex that Urza used.
And as a slight favor to those less familiar,
yeah, I was going to say, if you're completely unfamiliar with what we're talking about, this is old Magic lore where there was this cup, basically, that a very powerful planeswalker named Urza used to basically detonate a magical thermonuclear explosion that annihilated a good chunk of a plane, Dominaria in specific.
You saw somewhat of it depicted on Urza's Ruinous Blast, where the brothers' war between Urza and Mishra did not have good consequences or fallout for the plane of Dominaria.
Yeah, it was very, very collateral. Like this conversation has been, because we need to get back to these cards. So Liliana is the commander of the Dreadhorde. Bolas, for those of you who've been following Liliana's story, she's been trying to free herself from a contract that she made with 5 demons to restore her youth and vitality. 4 demons. And she managed to kill them all, and realized that because Bolas had been the one to broker the contract, he was now the owner of the contract and he could control her. And so he says, guess what? You are now the general of my dread horde because I have an army full of undead, and really I have more important things to do than drive them myself, so you drive them for me.
Right, and of course she acquired, probably through Bolas, the Chain Veil as well.
Alright, we're back after a brief technical difficulty. So what we were talking about is Liliana is now, by dint of Bolas's machinations, the general of his dread horde. And the Planeswalker really reflects this well. She's an expensive Planeswalker. That's my only pause is they've been pretty good about not making 6 mana Planeswalkers for a little while. And considering a lot of the other Planeswalkers in this set are very aggressively mana costed,
there was bound to be at least 1 or 2 that had a higher mana cost so that they had the space they needed to include more powerful abilities. And I am not disappointed to see that on Liliana, because if you've been following the story up till now, she is quite possibly the strongest non-Bolas Planeswalker on the plane. I mean, there's arguments for, Jace, Ugin, any of that, but Liliana is, as we've seen, extremely powerful.
She's the most willing to wield enormous amounts of power.
Mm-hmm.
There's been arguments as to whether Ugin's the most powerful, whether Jace is the most powerful, whether Karn's the most powerful. Liliana, next to Bolas, you can't deny that she is wielding power and great power with impunity.
Right. And I think, not to skip ahead too much, but I think where Bolas went wrong is because Liliana, if you know much about the color pie, she is a black planeswalker, meaning that she is on typically the more self-serving end of things. I thought Bolas probably thought he was secure in leaving her in charge, that she wouldn't defy him, because she knew that the cost of breaking her contract was her destruction. And most self-serving people aren't willing to do that.
Yeah. And he played he played smart, but as we'll see in some of the cards later, it didn't work out. Chandra, she is a red planeswalker that does damage to people's faces. That is not anything unexpected. And typical to Chandra, she has clauses where you can exile cards to get card advantage.
I do like that they focused on that element of her. Some of her previous iterations were a little on the weak side.
Nissa, her static ability is pretty strong. Anything that adds additional mana is not to be sneezed at. It is green mana, so for those of you with pollen allergies, there probably will be additional sneezing. But Nissa's a good card. The only issue I have with Nissa is it's a personal issue. I don't like animating lands because that means my lands can die. But that's entirely a personal standpoint. Now, the Simic Nissa, I didn't have an issue with because the lands were temporarily animated, and you animated a bunch of them to kill someone. This one's just one at a time. Let's look at Teo the Shield Mage over here. This guy right here, he's a new planeswalker. His static ability is really strong. Giving a player hexproof prevents you against targets, discards, burn, all kinds of things, and he helps defend himself.
Hexproof is one of those sneaky abilities where you don't realize how much it does for you until you see just how much it stops from coming at you.
Yeah. Speaking of things that are kind of more of a board control-y way, and I'll be getting to that theme in a minute, Kasmina Enigmatic Mentor spells your opponent's cast that target a creature or planeswalker you control cost 2 more to cast. So if you don't have Teo yet, Kasmina at least makes it harder for people to start sending stuff your way. Actually, no, I miscalculated. Teo can make you hexproof, and then Kasmina can make everything that targets your stuff more expensive.
Right. Now, these are the first 2 uncommon planeswalkers that we've come across, and we wanted to mention that just for a second because one of the primary concerns, I would say, of the Devoted Magic base coming into this set was that this many planeswalkers would have to mean that their power level is watered down, that there's maybe an overabundance of cards being printed in the Planeswalker slot, and that they'd have to be, weaker as a result. And the Planeswalker card type as a whole would suffer for it. Now, it's hard to judge with the set having not even come out yet, but just from what we've seen with these uncommon Planeswalkers, like James was saying earlier with the static ability, like I really think that they found a good way to make them strong without making them too strong.
Because each one is going to have it's going to change the dynamic of the board state just by existing, not by, I'm going to make a 2/2 blue wizard creature token, draw a card, then discard. Who even cares about that ability? Like, in my opinion, it's not a bad ability. I'm not knocking it excessively, but I care far more about Kasmina's static effect on the board than I do about her ability. Exactly. Especially because these Planeswalkers only tick down, so their static ability is just, realistically, it's something extra you get. You're paying for that static ability. Their activated abilities, are the ones that are just kind of extra.
I've seen them in some cases kind of compared to enchantments with loyalty abilities, but yeah, I don't think that's a perfect assessment. I mean, for obvious reasons, Naturalize doesn't kill them, but at the same time, they do offer you a way to adjust your deck for the meta in ways that enchantments can't necessarily accomplish.
Davriel is one of the ones that I think, and this is one of my personal things, I think he's one of the weakest. Because his static ability says one or fewer cards in hand, and I always look at cards through the rose-tinted lens of Commander, and it's very hard to get an opponent down that low.
I think it really depends on what colors you're playing against. If you're playing against a white-blue control deck that has nothing but card draw and removal, you're in for a bad time. At the same time, worst case scenario, even if it's just his -1, we've seen Mind Rot is a 3-mana sorcery that makes them discard 2 cards. If he's left alone, if you have ways to protect him, or if they're just not running a lot of creatures, he could make them discard 3 cards in total for 3 mana. Granted, it's over a period of time, but it still is better than maybe an equivalent sorcery.
Yeah. Sarkin, his +1 ability is probably one of the most hilarious things I've read on a card in a minute.
It's so fun.
Because I thought his last Planeswalker card could not get more dragon-focused. I was slightly incorrect. I still think that prior card has more dragon in it, but this one says all of your other Planeswalkers are dragons for a minute.
Which is pretty great.
It is pretty hilarious. And he makes dragons, he makes your Planeswalkers dragons, and he makes your dragons retaliate against things that attack you.
Right. Now, notably, your Planeswalkers don't stay dragons during their turn, so his static ability isn't going to trigger off that. But if you're playing, for instance, nothing but Planeswalkers and dragons and maybe some shock spells, then you're good to go.
Unless you're running the Teferi that lets you activate Planeswalkers on their turn, in which case it does matter.
Well, let's try to keep this within the realm of reasonability here.
Speaking of reasonable, Vivian, Champion of the Wilds, you may cast creature spells as though they have flash. That seems fair and balanced.
Okay, now 3 mana for this. This is probably my favorite walker from this set. Overall, she's not mythic, so she's going to be less expensive maybe than Gideon, but you can cast creatures as though they had flash. Something gets vigilance and reach. You can look at the top however many and put a creature possibly face down. Just really adds some. It lets the creature focused decks play the same way that the control decks are playing. It lets you meet them on their terms, and every control deck tries to hold up mana until they really need to use it. And they're always doing things at the end of your turn. This lets you play their game.
Speaking of interesting things that force people to play games in different ways, the Wanderer, who I love the art, I love the whole concept, I want to learn more about this enigmatic figure. Prevent all non-combat damage that would be dealt to you and other permanents you control. It gives you hexproof against non-combat damage.
Yep.
Which
and your permanents.
Which, it stops burn in its tracks, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If you had a way to protect her, it burns shuts off, and she can protect herself by getting rid of big things. Narset is probably, I think, one of the strongest walkers in this set. For her control capability, you can't draw more cards. So if they're running all these other planeswalkers that say draw cards, she shuts them out. And you can dig for non-creature, non-land cards from your deck using her.
To just hint on one more thing at the Wanderer, in case anybody hadn't thought of it yet. Once you have the Wanderer out, it's almost kind of like Tajic in that you can run like the Boros flavored board wipes, deal damage to each creature, and then your stuff is fine, and it's only their stuff that takes that damage.
Deal like Star of Extinction, for example.
Exactly. So just it really adds a layer to the game.
Ob Nixilis it represents a clock. He is a victory condition. Because as long as they're drawing cards, he's pinging them for damage, and you can tick him down to make them draw 2 cards, and you remove a threat. So I think he's a pretty solid piece for incremental control.
Yeah.
If you can keep him alive. Jaya, it's a red planeswalker that does damage to things. It's pretty much Chandra is learning from the venerated Fire Mage, and it's kind of what they do. Arlen, I think, is again probably one of the weakest, and I feel bad because she's a really cool concept, a werewolf planeswalker. But I think Arlen is just really weak, because she only cares about wolves or werewolves, and she only makes wolves. She costs 6 mana. And it's 6 mana to make a 3/3 3 times.
And then maybe what else you're playing. The biggest disappointment for me, it's not that I don't like her design, and I think it's a very interesting design. What makes me kind of sad for her is that her last Planeswalker didn't really see play either, and I don't think this one stands a much better chance.
No.
Especially given all these other Planeswalkers of seeing a lot of play.
Considering there's one other wolf in the set that will probably see play, but probably not with Arlen. Now we have the Cycle of Gods, which are quite honestly spectacular, because Nicol Bolas eternalized the 4 Amonkhet gods that he managed to kill. Hazaret is still at large, so we've been given a pig in recompense. God Eternal Oketra is probably in a vacuum, one of the strongest ones of this set.
I would agree.
Because she profits whenever you cast a creature spell. She's functionally a 6/6. And all of them have the clause of when they die or exiled from the battlefield, you may tuck them 3rd from the top of your deck.
I will admit, the first time this card got spoiled, it wasn't in English. It was translated from another language, and I was really surprised to find out that the 4/4 black zombie creature token whenever you cast any creature was not just some kind of mistranslation. Like,
oh yeah,
getting a 4/4 every time you cast a creature. I mean, you put her as the top of a curve in a white weenie deck, and you are set.
Oh yeah, you'll roll over people. For Commander, I think God Eternal Kefnet is probably one of the stronger ones, because it lets you copy instant or sorceries. You still have to pay mana, but it costs 2 less to cast, and you may reveal it. You don't have to reveal the card.
Right.
So
exactly.
you only would reveal it if you are electing to copy it. Realistically.
So this brings me to one just slight thing I wanted to hint at that we'll be talking about later as we review more cards. The reason that these creatures are so much different in Commander is because the power of their abilities is directly tied to the power of the cards that you can play with them, right? How strong these gods are is somewhat limited by the standard card pool, but when you have, these crazy powerful spells from older Magic, when you're dropping like Ornithopters and Memnites with God Eternal Oketra, it just becomes a whole different level of power.
Yeah, absolutely. My wife, she has a...
My wife.
She has a Teysa, the new Teysa, Commander deck, and she said God Eternal Oketra is going in that deck.
Oh, for sure.
Especially when you get the enchantment that says whenever you make a token, it's a 4/4 angel instead. So, yeah, it's a 4/4 zombie with vigilance, or it could just be a 4/4 angel with flying.
And vigilance.
No, it would...
No, it doesn't. It does lose that vigilance, but the angel tokens that card makes, I'm pretty sure also have vigilance.
No, I think the Tesa makes them vigilant. But, either way, Bantu, I think, is the weakest of the Amonkhet gods. Situationally, Bantu is really good, because when Bantu enters, it's an ETB. You sacrifice any number of other permanents and then draw that many cards. I could see it being in some weird, like, combo eggs deck of a sort, but...
I will say this much for Bantu, it's really, maybe besides that and Ronas, it's really the only one that can just come down and win you the game. Because if you imagine a situation where you're playing a tokens deck in black, and you've got just like 20, 40 zombies, and you enter and you sack them all, and then you have something like Blood Artist, or, you know, something else, another kind of effect whenever your creatures die, it could just end the game.
That is true. In the right situation, it's good. Again, it's another good one for Tesa.
And again, black always needs more card draw, so...
Alright, now we have the Angry Pig.
My favorite.
Ilarg the Raised Boar. When it attacks, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking, and it returns to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. It's kind of like a fixed or watered-down version of... what's-her-face? The Angel Dragon Demon Chick.
Kalia of
the Vast. Kind of a watered-down, fixed, if you will, version of that, where the creature doesn't stay in play, but you get to put any creature into play.
Right. And going for Ilharg is the fact that he himself is a very large threat.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention, God Eternal Ketra is a 6/6 functionally for 5. Kefnet's a 4/5 for 4. Bantu's a 5/6 with Menace for 5. Ilarg's a 6/6 for 5. And God Eternal Ronas is a 5/5 for 5. Ronas is Craterhoof's new best buddy. If you have a pile of creatures, you tooth and nail, get Craterhoof Behemoth and God Eternal Ronas. You resolve Craterhoof's ability first, then it resolve God Eternal Ronas' ability second, doubling the power and toughness of the things that have already gotten big, and you kill everything.
Everything.
And
everyone. And trample.
Everything and everyone you love is going to die with vigilance and trample. And...
I would say that the gods as a whole earned their mythic slot. The one I'm most personally excited for, of course, is Ilharg the Raised Boar.
Angry Pig is a good pig. Alright, scrolling down, we have some cool finale mythic cycles. All of these are X cost spells that are 2 of a color and X, and you do X of a thing, but if X is 10 or more, you do another X thing related. Finale of Glory, you get X/2/2 soldiers. If X is 10 or more, you create X/4/4 angels. Finale of Revelation, you draw X cards. If X is 10 or more, you shuffle your graveyard, draw X cards, untap 5 lands, and you have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. Finale of Eternity, you destroy up to 3 target creatures with toughness S or less. X or less? X or less. If X is 10 or more, return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Finale of Promise, you may cast up to 1 target instant card and up to 1 target sorcery card, each with converted mana cost X or less without paying their mana cost. You exile them if they're cast. If X is 10 or more, copy each of those spells twice.
Oh boy.
That one I think is probably one of the weakest of them. It's really cool. That one's very much, it depends on what you're casting.
That is the one that's going to be the most, maybe aside from the blue one, that's going to be the one that's subject to the most number of cost reducers, though. So I could see that getting pretty scary.
Yeah, it just depends on what you're doing with it. Because
Right.
Finale of Glory, you're getting tokens. Finale of Revelation, you're getting cards. Finale of Eternity, you're killing things. And it's situational because of how many creatures you get back. Finale of Promise is very dependent on what 2 spells you're targeting.
It does not do anything by itself.
You need the right fuel for it. Now, that said...
The ceiling on it is pretty
The
high.
ceiling on it is absurd. I would say it has the most variance of any card. Finale of Devastation, you search your library and or graveyard for a creature card with cover mana cost X and put it on the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. If X is 10 or more, creatures you control get +X and get haste until end of turn. That big thing you thought you killed, it's back.
And let's not forget, directly above, God Eternal Ronos, that's going to have that trigger if you choose to get him.
Yeah.
Finale of Devastation is phenomenal. There are already a lot of green tutors, but if you look back through Magic's history, a lot of the best green tutors only get green creatures. Finale of Devastation is one of those rare ones that gets creatures of any color, and it doesn't say just library or graveyard, it says library and. So you can get 2 creatures off this thing for X less than 10, which is really nice.
Moving on, we have the Triumphs. A sequence of uncommons that are kind of story-related in various ways. We, looking at the green one, this is Triumph, she animates Vitu-Ghazi and makes it fight people, which is pretty funny. There's a card depicting that directly. We have Chandra's Triumph, where she bests Dovin, does not kill him, wounds him, and bests him. We have Liliana's Triumph, where she has the 2 of the Amonkhet gods face off against Bolas. We have Jace, where he works on a plan to counteract Bolas's plan. And we have Gideon, who is kind of the hero of the set in certain ways. And we'll get to that. We have Bonds, depictions of the guilds working together. I highly encourage you to read the flavor text of all these cards. There's so much story here, and it would be hours and hours for us to go through.
The only thing I want to say about the Bonds is Bond of Passion. Gruul and Boros are my 2 favorite clans, so this had the potential to be my favorite card from the whole block, but unfortunately it's bad.
Yeah, it's not. The Bonds are okay. We have Ignite the Beacon, another search for Planeswalkers card. We have Commence the Endgame, which Amass is one of the mechanics of the set where you make, if you don't have an army token, you make a zombie army token and you put counters on it. And X is the amount of counters that you put on it. So we have Command the Dreadhorde, which is a really good card. Choose any number of target creature and or planeswalker cards in graveyards, not necessarily just your own. Command the Dreadhorde deals damage to you equal to the total converted mana cost of those cards, but you put them onto the battlefield under your control. Yeah, that, if you have some way to mitigate damage, because it's dealing damage, it's not life loss. So if you have some way to soften that blow, it's going to be really good. Speaking of ways to soften blows, Tybalt is not about that because he says your opponents can't gain life.
Right.
I believe this Tybalt is better than the prior incarnation.
I would say so.
That's not a hard thing to accomplish.
And I think that he does a lot that Rakdos is wanting to do right now.
Yes, absolutely. Zheng Yengu Wildcrafter, someone told me that he's kind of a big disappointment because the card itself is not terrible. The card itself is actually pretty good. But his dog is way better than he is.
Well, that's what happens. Before I came here today, I actually did do some thinking as to why Ignite the Beacon why White is the one who gets to search for Planeswalker cards, as we've seen with, Call the Gatewatch and things in the past.
Deploy the Gatewatch. And Ignite the Beacon. Something to something.
Right. And it got me thinking, why that's the case. And I realized that White is the one that most embodies the idea of getting reinforcements. And if I actually looked, and on Gatherer, there are 4 cards in Magic with reinforcements in the name, and they're all white. One of them is red-white, heroic reinforcements, but white is the color that has, people backup arriving. So
yeah. We have some really cool story spotlight cards. We have Ravnica at War, but who cares? We have Fibblethip the Lost. He's an interesting card. A 1/1 for 2. When he enters the battlefield, draw a card. If it entered from your library or was cast from your library, draw 2 cards instead. When he becomes the target of a spell, shuffle him into his owner's library.
And that's not a May. That he just goes in there.
Yeah. He's a Norrin the Wary that can't be exploited nearly as much.
Now, these next two cards that are coming up is what I was talking about earlier when I said the power level of the card is dependent upon the cards that it's getting. So, Deliver Unto Evil, you choose up to 4 target cards in your graveyard. If you control a Bolas, just get them all back. Otherwise, an opponent chooses 2 of them. You leave the chosen cards in your graveyard and put the rest into your hand. And then you exile it. This is, almost no matter how you look at it, a phenomenal card. Worst case scenario, you get 2 things back. You know, there's not a whole lot of Evolving Wilds or fetch lands going on in Standard, so you don't have to worry about just getting non-gas. And then, if you have a Bolas Planeswalker, the ceiling on this is really high. Like, if you
just get 4 cards back for 3 mana. If
you imagine playing this in a Grixis Commander deck, where you can play this and then expansion to copy it and get potentially as many as 8 cards back from your graveyard for 5 mana, like, the ceiling on this is really high.
You know what a better ceiling for this card is?
What's that?
Controlling a Bolas Planeswalker, step 1. Controlling God Eternal Kefnet, step 2. Top deck this card, pay 1 black, get 4 cards back, and you just keep this card in your hand and you don't have to use it again.
It's so good. But yeah, so it does depend on the power level of what you're getting back, but the card advantage itself is just so good.
We have a series of Dread Horde various things. We have the four promised Awakening of Vitu-Ghazi. There's a lot of cards in here that give zombies abilities. This is not one of them, I'm just talking. But there's cards that let you make army tokens and then say zombies have this, which is what zombie tribal decks want, and there's some good ones. There's Death Touch, there's Flying, there's, I think, Trample.
Yeah. Yep.
Not even a threat to the entire multiverse could persuade them to put aside their feud.
Single combat.
I saw a joke that basically said Sauron's grand plan, or Bolas's grand plan to get Sauron to come to Ravnica and be trapped is, guess what, Nahiri's there.
You might want to come over here.
How about this card right here? Narset's Reversal is really, really good.
It's kind of scary, actually.
It's Commander good. It's Paradox Engine good. No, it's not Paradox Engine.
Because, you bounce their spell, which is already unsubstantiate, and then you copy it? Okay, granted, this has to target an instant or sorcery. It's not like you can just make a token copy of a creature or anything crazy like that. But just the value on this thing is insane.
Yeah.
And you can copy the Vitu-Ghazi making instant as well.
Dreadhorde Invasion, we have a new sort of Bitter Blossom, as it were. You only make 1 token. That token continues to grow in size unless it dies. And it has an additional clause that if you have a zombie token of power 6 or greater, it gains lifelink, so it gains the life back that you've paid into it as long as it's survived for 6 turns.
So, and just infinite chump blockers almost.
We have another Krenko, which is technically strictly worse than the one prior, but
can be pretty explosive.
It's not hard to be strictly worse than the previous one. Planar Celebration. You've got a pretty cool array of things you could do. Proliferate is back, and they did do a slight functional wording change on how Proliferate works, for those of you familiar with it before. It used to be you pick any number of things and then give each another counter of a kind already there. Now it is you pick any number of things and you give another kind of all counters on it.
Interesting. I was not aware of that.
You cannot pick which kind of counters you're increasing. You only pick which things are getting proliferated.
That makes sense.
We have Tomic Distinguished Advocist, which is yet another cheap white legendary creature that makes your opponents hate their life. Lands on the battlefield and land cards in graveyards cannot be the targets of spells or abilities your opponents control. Oh, look, I have a land. I've got like a glacial chasm. You can't kill it now.
Yeah, I would say it's certainly a very niche ability, but at the same time, it's very strong.
Also, if you've got like a Wasteland Crucible of Worlds lock, your opponents can't get land back, but you can.
Very true.
Spark Double is an amazing clone. It's a 4-mana clone, as clones are apt to be, but this also lets you clone a Planeswalker, except it becomes non-legendary, and has an additional loyalty counter, or a +1 counter if it's a creature. So, a really good clone there.
I think this is flying under the radar. This has a chance to be way more powerful than we expect.
Oh, I expect it to replace... In a deck that would run clone, I expect to run this instead because it's the same mana cost and it's just better.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. Now, it does say you control, so, I mean, that does rule out the possibility of copying their things. However, that's not always terrible.
Massacre Girl is hilarious. Because as long as one thing dies, pretty much everything's going to die. As long as you can walk up that ladder. I mean, here's the thing though, there doesn't need to be a toughness 1 creature, then a toughness 2 creature, then a toughness 3 creature, then a toughness 4 in perfect order. If you're running a bunch of sapperlings and you dump a Massacre Girl, everything gets -6/-6. And then it's just going to start chaining at that point because at least something else is going to die.
Right.
And then it'll probably just kill everything.
Yeah, as long as there's like 2 or maybe 3 1-toughness creatures on the field, most likely everything's going to die. Even indestructible things.
Oh, yeah. Neheb Dreadhorde Champion is a card that I think is going to go into the existing Neheb deck. I don't think it's going to replace it, though. It's going to go into that deck.
I would agree. I do like that he counts even if you hit a Planeswalker. We haven't really seen that before. Most of the time with when you deal combat damage to a player abilities, you have to choose attacking the player to get value over their Planeswalker, and he just lets you not worry about that.
Challenger Troll's a neat little deck. He's mostly interesting by the fact that he's a 6/5 for 5. We have a Johnny's Pride Mate, which in a set this crazy is actually kind of slightly underwhelming by comparison.
I haven't seen a whole lot of Planeswalkers focused on life gain explicitly, but the deck is kind of already there in Standard.
Augur Bolas, we've seen that before. The Elder Spell, now this.
That's a spell.
This is a card. Destroy any number of target Planeswalkers. Choose a Planeswalker you control. Put 2 loyalty counters on it for each Planeswalker destroyed this way.
Is it too good?
This is 100% situational. It could just be 2 mana, kill a Planeswalker, and put 2 loyalty. If you don't have a Planeswalker, this kills a Planeswalker. Worst case scenario, you're killing a Planeswalker, that's a problem. Best case scenario, if you've got a Planeswalker and your opponent is running Planeswalker Tribal, and you kill like 4 Planeswalkers, your Planeswalker is going to reach ultimate. Now, this is particularly relevant in a set where you have so many Planeswalkers that only tick down.
That's true.
This is a way to recharge them. Proliferates in the set, you are seeing a lot of that. There's some literally right here. There's a lot of Proliferate in the set, but the Elder Spell, if you're running black, is a quick way to recharge Planeswalkers. If you're running Davriel and you're just wanting to make them continue discarding, this is a way to load him back up.
I would be surprised to not see this in at least the sideboard, probably just the sideboard of the upcoming Standard competitive decks.
Oh, absolutely, because with so many Planeswalkers, especially so many Planeswalkers that influence the board state, like giving hexproof or preventing non-combat damage, there's so many 3-drop Planeswalkers. I mean, there's a Jace that says win the game on him, and he's aggressively costed. So a card like the Elder Spell is going to be essential sideboard tech in Standard. I could see it being a great commander sideboard tech. If you are running Planeswalkers, this card is good. Just on the off chance that someone else plays a Planeswalker, you can advance your Planeswalker. If you're running, for example, a Nicol Bolas commander deck where you're using the flip creature Bolas, this is a card I would put in the deck because it can help advance my Bolas further.
Right, exactly, and his ultimate is very powerful.
We have Proliferate. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, Proliferate.
There's no way to break that, is there?
Oh, no.
Nothing you could do to abuse that?
So look, zombies have flying. Whenever this deals damage to a player or Planeswalker, you Proliferate.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they found a way to put Proliferate in each color, as far as I know, which is
good.
Good. Definitely.
We have Mawu, who is the Swollest Doggo.
He's
it's a 3/3 with Trample Vigilance for 4. If one or more counters would be put on him, that many +1 are put on him instead, he gets big fast.
Yep, so he's got his own built-in hardened scales.
Now we talk about story here. We have the prison realm. As near as we can tell, looking at the story here, Nicol Bolas is defeated in this set. The novel, which does not yet exist here in America, it's been released in other countries. There is a spoiler thread on Reddit. It's talking about the story here. Niv Mizzet ascends, kind of becomes the new guild pact. There's plans. There's all kinds of stuff going on. I'm just going to go through this article. Domri Raid, we know, dies. Dak Faden, we know, dies. Niv Mizzet becomes the guild pact. Bolas kills him, as far as I'm aware, and then he kind of reincarnates himself as the new guild pact. Chandra fights Dovin. She blinds him. She defeats him. Chandra blows up the immortal sun. Liliana betrays Bolas at the Citadel. Bolas tries to kill her using the contract. Gideon sees this, and he gives his immunity to Liliana in exchange for taking Bolas's damage on his body, which kills him, and Liliana lives. That's one of the biggest things of this set, is that Gideon Jura is dead. And they have said, this is not like Marvel or comics. He's gone.
Which does leave open design space for other White Walkers, like the Wanderer, to fill his place.
And while Kaya, we'll see scrolling down later, Kaya joins the Gatewatch. So we have a white-blue Planeswalker in the form of Teferi, and we have a black-white Planeswalker in the form of Kaya in the Gatewatch now.
Now, I think they picked a very Gideon way for Gideon to go.
Yes.
I mean, taking on someone else's death that they kind of deserved and were owed onto himself
from someone he didn't like.
Yeah, exactly. Just, I mean, it's very in character for him, I think.
Absolutely. And that's after he tried to kill Bolas using the Black Blade, but it didn't work out well for him.
He tried. It was a valiant effort.
Let's see. We have Jace and Vraska apparently kiss. Tezzeret's arm is destroyed with a bomb, and then he leaves.
His arm had special properties.
His arm is the planar bridge. So the planar bridge is gone. The immortal sun is gone. So Bolas's ways to power are being systematically dismantled. Hazaret gives her their spear to Samut, and she lets Niv Mizzet use it. Niv uses it to kill some of the zombie gods, but not Bantu. Ugin speaks to Jace in his mind and says that Bolas should not be killed because he'll return ever stronger, like some kind of Jedi, I guess. Niv punishes Ral, Vraska, and Kaya, and then tells Ral to search for Tezzeret and capture him. Vraska should search for Lily and kill her, and Kaya should search for Dovin and finish him. Ral apparently was a double agent working for Niv Mizzet the entire time.
Makes sense.
Bolas ends up in the meditation realm where he meets his brother. Ugin reveals that the meditation realm was his world before Bolas became a walker, and that he helped Niv Mizzet to be reborn thanks to Sarkin, who saved Niv's soul in a box made by Ugin. Ugin tells Bolas that the gem in the middle of Bolas's horns is part of Ugin's soul, and he saw every step and mistake from his brother. Bolas cannot summon magic anymore, not even a simple spell to fix his damaged wing. Ugin takes away both of Bolas's names. Now he can't be summoned ever. The meditation realm is now a prison for both Ugin and Bolas for eternity. None can leave or planeswalk to there anymore. Ugin tells his brother that he'll become his jailer for eternity and expand himself all over the meditation realm. Bolas has fear because he's nameless. Ugin tells him that now it is all over. Chandra and Nissa love each other but leave the conversation for later. I'm translating a little bit from a foreign language post on Reddit. called Spoiler Leak Bolas's Fate. So all of that I've just spouted out is grain of salt, pending the release of the novel, of course.
And that does come to us from Reddit user Jeremy Light 22.
Yes, so thank you, Jeremy Light 22, for your reveal. I hope it's all correct. But if it is correct, and the story does support what we see here in the cards.
Right.
So we have Bolas in this prison realm right here. Scrolling around a little bit, we've got them storming the Citadel. We've got this art on this card is amazing here. The Price of Betrayal. It's also really good way to kill planeswalkers. You remove 5 counters from target artifact, creature, planeswalker, or opponent.
So there's a lot of ways you can use this card. Very
this
versatile.
card is what was needed when someone had energy counters.
Yes.
A simple 1 black card to just get rid of energy.
So if there's an energy deck in Modern, that might be a little answer for it.
Zombies you control have Death Touch. There's the other wolf from the set. Now we're starting to hit the commons, so I'm only pointing out. I love this card. This card is amazing.
Yes.
This card is phenomenally good. I also love the art for those things. That's really cool. This one here, the flavor text is of note. It says, "This day will end in death, but not the one you hoped for. This day will end in victory, but not the one you expected."
Definitely a big reversal of expectations going on.
Then we've got this is another great flavor text. "You say this 10th district, not Rubble Belt. But where smash happened, that Rubble Belt. Rubble Belt, state of mind." Urgdar, Cyclops philosopher.
It's phenomenal. Well done, Urgdar.
Another story moment where Gideon tries to ride a Pegasus up to Bolas to kill him with the Black Blade, and the Pegasus is shot by Oketra. Let's see, we've got Demolish. Here we go. We have Gideon's Sacrifice. There it is. Choose a creature or planeswalker you control. All damage that will be dealt to this turn to you and permanent you control is dealt to the chosen permanent instead.
Now, I will say this. In all of the discussion I saw about that card, no one mentioned actually using it to target the Gideon Blackblade, which would be a phenomenal target for this card.
Because it doesn't actually kill him, so it's a slight flavor flail. Kasmita's Transmutation is another Lignify style effect. Turns it into a frog.
And it's not till end of turn. It isn't an enchantment. So it's pretty decent blue removal.
We have big blue zombie potamuses from Beyond the Stars. That's a thing that we have.
I'm glad it happened.
Yep. We didn't know we needed it, but we have.
The giant growth in this set looking extremely good.
Big doggo.
Big doggo.
Let's see. Scrolling. We have the Immortal Sun up ahead. Kaya now back in her less fancy duds. Obnixilis killing a bird because he's a jerk. I realized the art in Honor of the Godfarer, I realized what they're doing. They start in this pose, they move to this pose, and move to this pose. Because this pose is mimicking the shape of Bolas's horns.
Ah.
So they're bringing their arms up and bowing low in the shape of Bolas's horns.
That is interesting.
Yeah. We have the most brave bird in this set. Courier owls join the fray, attacking the Dread Horde with a viciousness usually reserved for male thieves.
Phenomenal. And it's got half prowess. Not full prowess.
It's pretty good. Sorin's Thirst exists.
Yeah,
I see you're out of the wall. Return to Nature. Okay, this card is worth looking at. This card is phenomenal.
Oh, it's amazing.
We've had 2 mana instant and or sorcery things to deal with artifact or enchantments, but this one goes one beyond by letting you remove a card from a graveyard.
Now, that is an extremely relevant ability against a lot of decks. As we saw earlier with the Deliver Unto Evil, people like getting back essentially free stuff from the graveyard. So, if you're up against a deck that's continually cycling through their graveyard or any kind of recursion, that's going to be able to take out a critical piece at the right time.
And I love the flavor text. Yes, nature is stronger. You don't see little buildings sprouting on trees.
If there were a plan for that to happen, it'd be Ravnica.
It would be.
It doesn't even happen on Ravnica.
Exactly. Let's see what else.
Ark Harvest, definitely a kind of iconic. Not story moment.
It is a
story moment, but then it's happening kind of all over the place.
Because it's the death of Domri Raid.
Mm-hmm.
And the working of it is it's 5 mana if you don't sacrifice a creature, but if you've got a token to sack, it's 1 black to kill a thing.
Yeah, and black, as we've already seen, has ways to amass and make tokens, so I could honestly see that getting played in Standard.
We have Kefnet versus Tameo going on right there. Teferi's Time Twists.
Oh, speaking of kind of upgrades on previous iterations of cards, like we saw with the natural, Topple the Statue is really interesting. Tap target permanent, but then if it's an artifact, destroy it, draw a card. So it's not like a strict upgrade on anything necessarily, but it's a card. Normally, if you run artifact and enchantment removal or anything of the sort, you have to worry if your opponent's actually going to be running those. So normally in Standard, they're in the sideboard. But this is one where, theoretically, it's always on, right? You can always tap down like their biggest creature or, any number of permanents, essentially.
Sarkin is striking me as, to use the meme, and my apologies to anyone who is a vegan in our audience, but it's that meme of the types of vegans who can't ever not bring up the fact that they're vegan, like they have to let you know. Sarkin is that way with his love of dragons.
Yes.
Because everything is dragons, even sometimes my hands.
My dragons do CrossFit.
Yeah, pretty much. The Wanderer's Strike, we got more. Fibblethip is on top of the Bolas statue. This card, okay, this one right here is the most flavorful card in the whole set.
And its name is?
Unlikely Aid. Target creature gets +2/+0 and gains indestructible until end of turn. It's 1 and a black instant. The card is not that remarkable. It's okay.
It's good and limited.
But it's Gideon surfing Rakdos down to try to kill Bolas.
That's a lot of flavor right there. That's
so
a lot
much
of flavor.
So much flavor. Now we hit the multicolored cards. We have Nicol Bolas Dragon God. Cool art, a 5 mana Bolas.
Cheapest Bolas we've seen so far that comes in as a Planeswalker.
Nicol Bolas Dragon God has all loyalty abilities of all other Planeswalkers on the battlefield. We'll come back to that. +1, you draw a card. Each opponent exiles a card from their hand or a permanent they control. -3, destroy target creature or Planeswalker. -8, each opponent who doesn't control a legendary creature or Planeswalker loses the game. So, I was a little annoyed at first, because I am sometimes an idiot. And I looked at this Bolas, I'm like, he's the Dragon God. This is the ultimate form of Bolas. Why does he not have 4 inherent loyalty abilities? And then I looked again and said, oh, it's because he has all of them. That top one is a 4th ability.
It sure
in that
is.
it's whichever one exists at the moment.
Now, of note, he does only copy loyalty abilities. He doesn't get their static abilities.
Which would be amazing if he did.
But I would say, compared to other Bolas iterations, though, this is a strong card.
Yeah, and he straight up goes into the whole winning the game. So if you cast the Elder Spell and kill every other Planeswalker on the board, you will have enough to put him at 8. Okay, you only need to kill 2 Planeswalkers with him to reach ultimate.
With the Elder Spell.
With the Elder Spell. You only need to kill 2. And then you -8 him, and then those players just lose the game.
That seems like a Bolas thing to me.
Tezzeret Master of the Bridge is the one of 2 reasons why Mycosynth Lattice has shot up in price recently. Because creature and Planeswalker spells you cast have affinity for artifacts.
What could go wrong?
The rest of his abilities are kind of...
His +2 is insane.
His +2 is his best ability, arguably.
It is. I don't know why I'd ever do the other abilities. He deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of artifacts you control. You gain X life. You could have, even in Standard, you could have like 5, 6, 7 artifacts on the field by the time you play this guy?
Yeah.
Just insane amounts of damage. He's a win condition.
Johnny the Great-Hearted, you know, his -2 is his best ability, and that, I think, is what makes him slightly less good than some of the other Planeswalkers, because his plus is
I like creatures having vigilance.
He goes in 3 very different directions with his abilities, because he has an ability that benefits creatures, and then he has an ability that's just life gain. It's an undo a lightning bolt. And then he has a negative ability that cares about creatures and Planeswalkers.
Right.
So if you have only him on the board, the +1 is the only thing that's going to do anything.
Yes.
So he's very much... It's a typical Ajani play where he wants to have friends.
Now, one of the things they've been doing in the set that I really like, again, I kind of mentioned this with Chandra earlier, they're finding ways to combine previous abilities that previous Planeswalkers have had of that type. So, for instance, Ajani, we've seen an Ajani that can gain you life. We've seen an Ajani that puts counters on other things, but we've never seen one that has that mixture of those abilities at the same time.
We have Domri, Anarch of Bolas, literally wielding a Bolas-shaped thing.
It's the best one.
It's a great Domri because he gets mana and makes your spells uncounterable. He makes your creatures better, and then he lets your creatures fight. And he's 3 mana.
Love this card. So anytime they say X can't be countered, I am buying and casting that spell, because if there's one thing that I dislike, it's getting my spells countered. It's good in aggro, it's good in mid-range, like, you know, this Domri, I think, is going to see a lot of play, or if not, I'll be playing it.
Next up is a card that already has some infinite combos in Standard.
It didn't take long.
It took like 2 minutes. Because whenever you cast whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, Ral's Storm Conduit deals 1 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. We won't bore you with the details of those infinite combos. You can find them online pretty easily. His +2 lets you scry. His -2 lets you copy spells. So his -2 lets you deal 2 damage using his static.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, honestly, everything from Lightning Bolt to Brainstorm is just value with this guy.
Sauron, as long as it's your turn, creatures and planeswalkers you control have lifelink.
Ooh.
He deals 1 damage to target creature or planeswalker,
Ooh.
which will gain you some life. And it lets you return a creature card with converted mana cost from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it becomes a vampire.
Ah, it's so good.
He's pretty good.
I love it.
Tameo is really strong because spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause you to discard cards or sacrifice permanents.
James, I don't know if you know this, but Eldest Reborn, very popular enchantment in Standard right now. And this is going to affect any deck, really, that has black in it.
Yeah. And it lets you dig for cards, and it lets you get cards back from your graveyard. So she is quite good. Not as good as this asshole right here.
They already had a good one. Why'd they make another?
They made a better one because it's Teferi with Creature Teferi's ability slapped on him.
Yeah.
And it lets you cast your spells, just sorcery spells, as though they had flash. And it lets you bounce things to their owner's hand and draw cards.
He doesn't, like, win the game the way the bigger one does, if you will, but, like,
he will lock the game down. He will lock this game down.
Yeah.
So fast.
So, the relevant thing about sorceries. So, if people can play an instant that does an equivalent effect, they're going to play the instant. So why do sorceries get played? Sorceries get played because they do things that instants aren't supposed to do. Like, you know, destroy all creatures, or board wipes, or things like that. So, you know, his +1 looks like a do-nothing. But if you build your deck the right way, it's far from it.
+1 on your turn, Urza's Ruinous Blast.
Exactly. Like, just...
Speaking of historic things, we have Niv-Visit Reborn, which I am really tempted to try to build, but everyone's not quite sure how to build this guy.
I'm just honestly going to build him Guilds Matter and just probably, honestly, even if it's not optimal, just use stuff from the 3 Ravnica blocks.
I'm tempted to just get every, we have all these great 2-color Planeswalkers, and just throw a 2-color Planeswalker deck together with Niv-Mizzet.
Ooh, that could be really nice.
Yeah. It would be a lot of fun, and you would have like a 5-color control, which that's a point I'm still going to get to. But when he enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each color pair, choose a card that's exactly those colors from among them. Put the chosen cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So they've already done the math. You will hit a perfect 10.01% of the time in an optimally built deck.
Sure.
So you're never going to get 10 cards with this guy.
And even then, I'm not sure you need to, because if you're playing him when you have 5 mana, that's 3 cards that are getting discarded.
Yeah. So realistically, you want to hit 2 or 3 cards every time with him, so you want your whole deck to be multicolored. Things like Putrefy, Abrupt Decay.
Now, in
Death
Commander,
Sprout.
that's a walk in the park to some extent. You just need to make sure that there's the right balance between the 2 colors, because if you err on the side of Orzhov and, Golgari things, then that's going to be fewer things you can hit per trigger. But in Standard, I can see it, but it's going to be a little harder to pull off.
I can see a deck leaning into 3 color pairs predominantly, like Esper or Gruul, or not Gruul, like Jund, or some color set predominantly. Yeah. Lean in that direction so you'll consistently get at least 1 out of those 3 every time you roll the dice with him.
5 color decks are already popular in Standard because of the Chromatic Lantern, because of the ability to search for gates, the ability to tap for mana of any color. So definitely playable in Standard.
I even kicked around an idea of making a Maze's End win condition in a Niv Mizzet Reborn deck just for giggles, because Guild Pact.
He's very flavorful.
This guy, I love the art. I'm actually slightly disappointed with the card, because the card really wants more things to happen.
I feel like he didn't need to be a mythic. Like, okay, they would have had to reduce the amount of text on him if he weren't a mythic, but I don't know that he's that strong.
Because he's a flying with trample, he's a 4/5 for 5. Okay, that's not terrible. When he enters the battlefield, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on another target creature you control. So that automatically is slightly feel bad to me, because you can't make him a 6/7.
That's true, but then if you make him a 6/7, then they just need 1 removal spell. At least this kind of spreads the love a little bit.
When he dies, you proliferate, then proliferate again. I've seen some... Don't get me wrong, the card is not horrible, but he looks like a card that you'd want to build around, and I'm sure I've seen a couple theses, if you will, where people built some interesting hypothetical builds with him that are really good.
Mm-hmm.
He just doesn't excite me as much as I would have hoped in a vacuum.
So the thing is, they built him with a reactionary ability in a color pairing that I don't feel accomplishes it that way. So it's like when he dies, right? So it's almost like a punishment. Like your opponents don't want to kill him because it's going to reward you when they do so. But the thing is, with green and blue, unless you've got black in there for soul tie, you don't have any good ways of abusing that. There's no way to sacrifice him at instant speed kind of thing to mandate when that trigger goes off. And I feel like his last line of text is probably his strongest line of text.
Yes, absolutely, and that's what all the builds were built around, is that double proliferate, and or cloning him or something to get multiple instances or triggers of it. But this Simic card...
As if 1 Hydra weren't enough.
The Bioessence Hydra, move over... what's the Hydra in Standard right now?
Hydroid Crisis?
Move over, Hydroid Crisis. We have a 4/4 for 5, but it's not really a 4/4 for 5. It has trample, but it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each loyalty counter on planeswalkers you control. Mm. Whenever 1 or more loyalty counters are put on planeswalkers you control, put that many counters on Bioessence Hydra. This card is nuts, and I think this card is really great for a specific reason. Planeswalker Matter decks are vulnerable to aggro, and they don't run a lot of creatures. In fact, some of them lean on that and run lots of board wipes to clear the board. This gives a win condition that says, Planeswalker decks, this is for you. Mm-hmm. If you're running Planeswalkers, you're going to get a threat on the board that is going to be obscenely large very quickly.
Right, so I think that this guy kind of wants those +2 walker decks, or walkers that come in with high loyalty even if their abilities are a little weaker. What makes this guy different from Hydroid Crisis is they're kind of built to accomplish different things.
Oh, very different.
This guy's a champion that just comes down and smacks for the win. Hydroid Crisis is more or less designed to refill your hand and kind of provide some definite late game value.
What's that card that you have to pick 4 different things? It's like Decimate or whatever it is?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Casualty of War is a better Decimate. It costs more. It's a different color set. Mm-hmm. Decimate, I believe, costs 4, I believe.
Yes, Decimate is 2, a red and a green.
But this costs 6, but you could choose 1 or more, so you're not locked into having the required targets for all of them.
Right.
And it hits everything.
Artifact, creature, enchantment.
It hits any
land,
permanent type.
Planeswalker. And one of each, so you can get 5.
Mm-hmm. You can just...
So the question you have to ask yourself when you read this card is why not just run a wipe, okay? Because what this does for you, whether it's in Commander or Standard, is it lets a quote-unquote board wipe style effect only benefit you and not in any way the other player. Yeah. Granted, if you have no creatures out and you Wrath of God, sure. But at the same time, a lot of the, 5-drop, 6-drop wipes you see, could hurt you as well. This one's, unless you're just doing something intentionally sacrificial, you're not going to feel any repercussions from playing this spell.
Speaking of repercussions, the Dreadhorde Butcher is an amazing aggro card for Rakdos.
I don't know what's going to happen with him because obviously that turn 3 win that was floating around when he first got spoiled, it's not consistent really in any way. It's really hard to pull off, but I'm wondering if it's consistent enough that they'll have to ban a part of it.
Feather the Redeemed, we have a card for Feather now.
Ooh.
And it's a good one.
Ooh.
Because she's also the reason that Sunforger is jumping up in price right now. Because
Aurelia's Fury as well.
Sunforger and Feather is quite good.
Oh, yes.
Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets a creature you control, exile that card instead of putting it into your graveyard as it resolves. If you do, return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. So for those of you not familiar with Sunforger, whenever you detach the equipment Sunforger, it lets you search your deck for a cheap spell and cast it. So this, you would load up with battle effect spells, or pump spells, or double things like Boros Charm.
Cantrips are very popular.
Oh no, Boros Charm does not target.
It can.
It can, but... So you'll see a Spell Matters Feather Redeem deck. And it'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, so obviously we're not the first to say this could be the best Boros Commander ever, and we're definitely not the most qualified to comment on it, like some of the other Commander channels out there. But I will say that this solves a lot of the problems that Boros has in Commander, to some extent.
We have Living Twister's an odd one.
I love it. It's so
It's
cool.
an odd card. It lets you do stuff with lands. Oath of Kaya, though, is probably one of the best oaths we've seen. Oath of Teferi is still the best oath, in my opinion.
Yeah, but
Oath
no
of
one wants
Ajani's...
to play it because it costs 5.
I play it because it just lets you run away with the game. Oath of Ajani's really good. Oath of Nis is really good. Oath of Kaya is just so strong because it has a life swing when it enters.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other oaths, their enter ability is less good. Like Ajani, it puts counters on things if you don't have things to put counters on.
Right, yeah.
This is just, I'm going to deal damage to any target, and I gain 3 life.
That is super relevant. I will say the any target makes this really different from other effects of its type.
Because you can kill a creature, you can finish off another planeswalker. It's really good. Whenever an opponent attacks a planeswalker you control with 1 or more creatures, Oath of Kaya deals 2 damage to that player, and you gain 2 life. The interesting thing about this is, it does say 1 or more creatures. So if they attack that planeswalker with 3 creatures, this only triggers once.
Right.
However, if you have multiple planeswalkers, and they attack multiple planeswalkers, this will probably... I'm reading this correctly, this will trigger... for each instance of that.
Attacks a planeswalker you control. Yeah, as far as I can tell, it would trigger for each planeswalker attacked.
Yep.
For 3 mana, this is really something. I haven't actually looked at this before.
This is a... I just noticed it reading it now. I'm like, that affects every planeswalker that's targeted.
Jeez Louise. And
it's a... Again, for those Planeswalker decks that don't run a lot of defensive creatures or creature presences, this is a huge deterrent. Because, you could attack me, you could attack my Planeswalkers and try to kill them, but you're going to lose 6 or more life in the offing, and I'm going to gain that life. So the Planeswalkers are functioning as ablative hit points,
right?
In that you're attacking them, and they're even further functioning as a blade of hit points in that you attacking them is giving me more life.
I mean, it's the most common way to deal with a Planeswalker is to swing at it. I will mention, though, there's already kind of a life gain deck that uses, like, Dawn of Hope, a Johnny's Pride Mate.
Yes.
Very good in this.
Solar Blaze. Each creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. Pretty good.
Beautiful art. I will say Role Reversal is the cheapest version of that kind of effect we've seen before. Most of them cost 5 or 6 mana.
How about this Lich?
I've never been a fan of Liches. What does it do?
It has Trample. It's a 5/4 for 4, so even in that vacuum, it's pretty good. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, return to your hand target creature or planeswalker card in your graveyard that was not put there this combat.
Oh man, that's fine. I mean, it's just recursion. You know, if you're already in a Golgari deck where you're playing turn 1 Stitcher Supplier, milling yourself, like just...
I see this card for commander purposes. I don't see him being a commander. I see him going into a deck like Marin of Clan Neltoth or something like that.
Marin's trigger is honestly just stronger because she gets it back anyway and you don't have to do anything.
He gets back a planeswalker.
Oh, that's true.
But I see him as... You put him in Marin, she'll bring him back, and then he'll hit stuff and get more stuff back for you.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, you just want more stuff. That's what Magic's all about.
Speaking of not having more stuff, Time Wipe. Return a creature you control to its owner's hand, then destroy all creatures.
So that 3-drop Teferi we were talking about. My gosh. Okay, so we were talking earlier about Liliana and Ugins and Jace's power level. Let's not forget our old friend Teferi here. He's manipulating time is kind of its own special kind of power that's hard to measure.
Yeah, it's a really good card. For a deck that likes... I was thinking of, like, if you were building an Atraxa Planeswalker deck, because that's the thought that keeps coming to my mind looking at this. And again, that's on a topic I'll get to once we're done looking at everything. Now, you would bounce your one creature, which is going to be Atraxa.
Right, because Atraxa doesn't have red, so you can run this, yeah.
Yeah, and so you would bounce that, and then nuke everything else.
Yeah, I mean, bounce Atraxa so you don't have to pay commander tax, or...
Yeah.
And, you know, let's not forget in Commander, making your entire board indestructible for a turn or something, super easy to do.
Tolsmere Friend of Wolves. Similar to you not looking at Kai, I haven't looked at this guy really yet.
So he's very
because he wasn't a planeswalker.
To his previous iteration. His previous iteration was 6 mana and gave each of your green creatures +1/+1 and each white creature, I think, +1/+1. And then he could tap to make a Voja token that was like a 4/4, I think. This one, people have pretty much agreed, is a little better, at least as far as value is concerned.
So he's the 4th wolf in the set, or he makes them. And you gain 3 life and the creature fights something.
Whenever a wolf enters, yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
So, I mean, they're kind of throwing you a bone. They're saying the Wizards is essentially saying here, we can't print that many stuff that just cares about wolves, but there's just enough there to where if you really work at it, you could center your deck around that.
Widespread Brutality is an interesting pseudo-wipe. Because at the very least, you're going to make a 2/2 that is going to deal 2 damage to each non-army creature. So, yeah, it's not fighting them, so your 2/2 is going to live. And depending on the other creatures in the board, it's a 2/2 that is dealing... It may not kill those other creatures, but you have to look at the total damage that 1/2/2 is dealing, and it's a lot for 4 mana. Exactly.
And I mean, you know, when you think about the fact that if it's a previous one that you had given lifelink and just all sorts of stuff like that, really makes the Wanderer look better, honestly, because, again, Wanderer prevents combat damage to your creatures, so then...
Or non-combat.
If they play Widespread Brutality, you know, you're fine, which, in that case, of course, they just wouldn't play it until she was gone, but at the same time...
Angerous Rampage is pretty good, because it's selective. You pick one thing for 2 mana, sorcery, and they sack it, which again, Tameo plays against. There's a lot of cards that go, I do this thing, and then on the other side of the alliance, if you will, where the battle lines are drawn, there's a card that says, no, you don't.
No, you don't.
And there's things on both sides that do that.
Because, I mean...
Because it's a war.
Yeah, and I mean, Sacrifice, I mean, there are ways to stop that. They're very few and far between, but like that gets around like Indestructible and stuff like that. Like this can kill Gideon, this can kill, you know, if they only have one of that thing, it's phenomenal. They're not going to reprint Dreadbore in this set, obviously, but this comes pretty dang close.
Death Sprout. The sad ending of a story of a girl who wanted to ramp began in the card growth spiral, concluded here.
I didn't know that.
Well, yeah, in the growth spiral...
It's the same girl?
It's the same girl, yeah.
What?
Yeah.
That's wild.
Same artist, Seb McKinnon.
I didn't know that much.
Destroy target creature, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library. It's pretty good.
I'm telling you, for an uncommon at instant speed, this card is flying under the radar as far as I'm concerned. We don't know how creature heavy the meta will be, we don't know how many planeswalkers there will be there, but when there's a creature that you need to kill, this is the spell for it.
I think you're thinking about this card right here.
No, get out of here. I don't want that.
D-Spark for a white and a black instant. Exile target permanent with converted mana cost 4 or greater.
Literally, probably the most common... Like, we talk about these big, powerful spells we're going to play in Commander, but this is going to get into more decks than any of the Commander cards we've talked about so far.
Oh yeah, this card is just...
I mean, it's just good. So look at what this does and doesn't do. You know, you got anytime you evaluate a Magic card's power level, you got to think worst case scenario and best case scenario. Worst case scenario, they don't have anything. Their entire deck is CMC 3 or less, and you kind of, hurt yourself. But I mean, most of the time it hits. It doesn't deal with the little stuff, but it deals with a big threat, and it deals with a big threat cheaply. And I think those two things in combination is
2 mana, deal with the big thing, get it gone.
Right. Whatever their biggest thing is, get it out of here.
Dovin's Veto is another card that's just going to see play because it's a 2-cost, a bit color restrictive, but not really. 2-cost, can't be counter target non-creature spell.
So just the ultimate card in
it's
the mirror
that
match.
Exchanges the colorless mana cost for white in exchange for being uncounterable.
I see a future where there's just these Esper Control Teferi decks with, Elder Spell in the sideboard and Dovin's Veto in the sideboard, and they're all just ready to fight each other. And they'll be sitting there like, man, but we still have to prepare for mono red. Why can't I answer everything?
I mean, the Esper Control is already a really dominant deck in Standard.
I mean, it's just so
and
good.
It's only going to get better with these cards.
And, I want to build a deck that can beat it, but it's not easy. They can answer just about anything.
We've got gaining life, drawing a card. We've got zombie tokens you control have hexproof and menace.
That seems pretty good.
Seems pretty solid. We have Gideon going to the afterlife. Kythian.
And card advantage in Boros, which is not common.
We've got a pretty good Raptor.
Proliferate. Yep, just more Proliferate going on.
I love this card. Just everything about it makes me feel like a happy man. It's a Nightmare Beast. It has the word Leyline in it. It's one of my favorite colored combos. It's a 2/3. It has 2 awesome keywords, and it's a mana dork. This card's just fun.
I mean, it's amazing. It's honestly, it's an amazing design.
Yeah. Speaking of, what do you think of Neoform?
So I've seen some people say that you can do some weird stuff with it. You can... There's that 1-drop guy that brings in a land. You can then sack him to go and get your Incubation Druid with the counter on it. Have 7 mana the next turn. So that's just it. Neoform it's very Simic. It's designed for you to experiment and see what kinds of weird, tricky things you can pull off with it. Definitely the kind of card you would want to run in a Vannifar deck.
How about a combat trick in Pledge of Unity?
Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. You gain 1 life for each creature you... I mean, yeah.
3 mana instant.
Good. The thing is, it's going to have to contend with things like Make a Stand and the other one? I can't remember the name of the one where it's if you cast it on your main phase, they get a +1/+1 counter in addition to the indestructible.
I'm not remembering which one that is.
Formation, I think.
Another cheap 2 mana card that's phenomenally good. Tyrant's Scorn. Destroy target creature with converted mana cost 3 or less. Return target creature to its owner's hand.
That seems pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So, 10th District Legionnaire. Let me tell you how I feel about Boros. Heroic was one of my favorite mechanics. I started playing Magic right at the end of RTR, right when Theros was coming out, and Heroic was the first real deck that I felt like I had any ownership of. And just to see a card that has effective Heroic, that's just a good body, 2/2 for 2 with haste, red and white, whenever you cast a spell that targets her, put a +1 counter, then scry one, this is... I'm not going to say this is what the Boros deck needed, because I don't know what Boros is even doing right now, competitively speaking, but this is a phenomenal little soldier.
We have Angrath, Captain of Chaos. Creatures you control have menace, and you can amass 2.
Or as I like to call it, Avast 2.
He's okay. He's far from one of the best, and I think the menace is good, but the fact that it is this mechanic in particular makes him slightly less interesting to me.
What's interesting about Rakdos is they almost always have higher power than toughness. So if you just have like 3-4 creatures out and throw this guy down, I mean, that could be like a game-winning situation right there.
Now, these next two planeswalkers, Ashiok. Let me tell you about Ashiok.
I don't even remember what she does or he or whatever. I just know
they say spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause their controller to search their library.
Oh no.
And -1, it's at 5 loyalty for 3. Target player puts the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard, then exile each opponent's graveyard. Here's the thing. It's a 3 mana planeswalker, which is right around the time where your opponents are starting to cast a lot of ramp spells. And you go, about that.
How about you don't circuitous route this turn, and your whole strategy fails?
Yeah.
What's that? Your hand is nothing but Carnage Tyrants? Let's make sure you can't Evolving Wild.
And I'm just going to make sure you don't have a graveyard. Here's the deal, though. I want to take a slight break after we look at the next one. Dovin Hand of Control. Artifact, instant, and sorcery spells your opponents cast cost 1 more to cast. Once again, 5 mana for 3 with a -1. The -1 says, until your next turn, prevent all damage that will be dealt to and dealt by target permanent an opponent controls. Stopping here. We have seen Ashiok, Dovin, Jace. I'm going to scroll back up because Teferi, Oath of Kaya, Tameo, Tezzeret.
It's almost ready-made.
And going back up to the top, we have the Jace here. We have Teo giving hexproof. We have Kazmina. We have the Wanderer. We have Narset. All of these cards, Narset's 3. This is 4. This is 3. This is 4. This is 4. Going back down to these multicolored. He's 6, slightly outside the thing. She's 4. He's 3. This is 3. And now at the end we have 3 and 3. All of these come, aside from Tezzeret, come down in the first 4 turns of the game. Not all at the same time, but they can start coming down on turn 3, and then on turn 4 you drop another one. And all of them have such a strong control element in Esper colors. I'm going to be building Atraxa Super Friends again. And I'm going to run all of these in it. Because what does that get you? They can't search their library. I'm hexproof. Their artifact, instant, and sorcery spells cost 1 more. Their spells cost 2 more if they target a creature or permanent of mine. I'm going to win the game if I deck out. I can't sacrifice things. If they attack my things, there's a life swing. What else was there? Yeah, there's just so much control. They can only draw 1 card a turn because of Narset. There's so much control in the early turns of the game where this kind of control really matters.
Teferi does they can only do stuff at sorcery speed?
Yeah, Teferi, they can only do sorcery speed stuff. It's so strong.
It's a lot, honestly.
It's a lot.
I mean, control was already super good in standard.
But Esper Planeswalker control's going to be a thing, I think. If not in standard, definitely in Commander, you will be able to see it. And there's a couple Planeswalkers we haven't gotten to yet that are going to make it even worse.
I don't know how you stop it, though. Like, even if you play, like, turn 1, turn 2, turn 3 creatures to swing at them, like, they're just going to board wipe on turn 5.
Or you just use the Wanderer to exile a creature if it's big enough.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
or Dovin to go. If it's big enough, the Wanderer exiles it. If it's small enough, Dovin just locks it down.
Yeah, like, where's the weakness, though? Like, they can counter whatever you do. Like, so if you try to Elder Spell them, they can counter that. Like,
well, if they're tapping out to play these walkers, there's windows, but it's going to get out of hand fast.
Really wish I picked up a playset of Gruul Spellbreakers when I had the chance.
Huatli is an interesting creature, but a lot of dinosaurs have a lot of toughness. so it plays well into dinosaurs.
There's a 4-drop 1/7 with no abilities.
Kaya Bait of the Dead strips hexproof from your opponents, and so she straight up counters the Wanderer because it says, "Oh, you can't be hexproof."
Oh, the Tevo.
Oh yeah, Teo, sorry. And she exiles a creature, period. Kiora would be decent in Atraxa when you cast your commander, but I don't want to have her just for the one-off of me casting my commander.
She's really cool though. Like in the deck
7
where you're
loyalty.
playing that, and the ability to untap target permanent. Like in commander, that stuff like Nykthos, Gaia's Cradle. it gets out of hand.
Well, actually, I think I just saw a very valid reason to include her in my Atraxa deck. Chainveil.
Oh, Chainveil. Gosh darn it.
So you get 7 free untaps of the Chainveil.
Why you gotta be like that?
As long as you've got mana.
You should put a Johnny in there too. I mean, I know he cares about creatures, but putting a counter on each of your planeswalkers.
Johnny is probably going in there as well. One that's not going in there is Nahiri. She's pretty good.
I like she cares 2 things for her
She has a very narrow strategy.
Like, they saw her static and they were like, that's not really good enough. We'll give it a second thing as part of her static.
Yeah. She's very narrow. She's good, but she's narrow.
I don't like her minus, honestly.
You know what's really good?
Mm-hmm.
Saheeli Sublime Artificer.
No.
Because I'm going to cast a non-creature artifact and get a servo.
Why does it say non-creature, though? Why couldn't it just say whenever you cast an art, like why couldn't it just be Psy? Like, seriously, they're gonna opt 4 times at the end of my turn and get 4 servos. I'm just gonna lose.
And target artifact you control becomes a copy of an artifact, so that's pretty good.
That's just, that is, there's some stuff we haven't figured out with
Summit, haste on creatures. I'm a little confused by the -1 because it gives haste.
It does give haste.
When the thing already has haste.
So, that's in case her minus kills her.
You're right, because Jace has the same thing on his win the game ultimate.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
You see, because the thing is, static abilities don't check until a certain point. So with
Until they
Jace,
resolve.
right, the ability has to finish resolving before you have the replacement effect or something like that. It gets a little weird.
Vraska is a good one to put in the Atraxa because whenever a creature you control with Death Touch, which Atraxa has, deals damage to a player or planeswalker, you put a counter on it.
There's a 1-drop 1/1 with Death Touch in Standard right now.
And you create a assassin creature with Death Touch, and it says whenever it deals damage to a planeswalker, kill the planeswalker.
Yep, that seems like Vraska. I will say, a lot of these planeswalkers came with their own, like, buddy spell, like either it's a creature or like an instant or sorcery. Hers, it's a 2 and a black, 3/2, and when it enters, it says if a planeswalker took damage, or you can destroy a planeswalker that took damage this turn. Like, and that's really good. Especially, it's like a common, I think, or something, so you could play that in, in limited, especially.
I think it was right up here. Vraska's finisher.
Yep, Vraska's finisher. So honestly, that was among the first cards that got spoiled, and I thought it's really good.
All right, so now we move on to the artifacts of the set. Parhelion 2, we basically pulled the Borderlands 2 Catch a Ride, and now the Boros Garrison is airborne. It's a really good card. I have one hilarious problem with it.
It's 8 mana.
It dies to Doomblade.
Gosh darn it.
We have the Citadel of the Doomblade.
Oh my gosh, it dies to removal. It's so much work to make it happen.
Or you can swan song it too. I mean, it's technically flying, but it's a bird now.
Yep. Oh man.
But it's really good. It is really good.
It's good. It's a big investment, and it costs even after that to crew it, and it's just the fact that it can be stopped for 1 or 2 mana that keeps it from being insane.
Silent Sub is really good. Drawing cards, it's pretty solid. We'll skip the Citadel. We'll look at the Mizium tank. I like the fact that the tank wakes up when you cast non-creature stuff. That's pretty cool.
That's pretty nice.
And it's got Trample. It's a 3/2, and it gets bigger. Vivian's Arkbow is interesting.
For you Commander players out there, Vivian's Arkbow is essentially at the top of the list right now for cards that are the most relevant for Commander. Vivian's Arkbow is incredibly, incredibly good.
Because you can just keep ticking it. Bolas's Citadel. is probably one of the most powerful cards in this whole set. Because you may look at the top card of your library anytime. It's 6 mana, 3 and 3 black, legendary artifact. You may play the top card of your library. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its converted mana cost rather than pay its mana cost. You can tap it and sacrifice 10 non-land permanents. Each opponent loses 10 life. It's interesting that it says you may play the top card, because it means if there's a land on top of your deck, you can dig deeper and just get that into play.
Right.
But here's the thing with this. It's instantly broken in Commander because of the existence of Sensei's Divining Top.
Yes, it is.
You can basically draw your entire deck for the cost of 1 life per card.
Yeah, so in that way, it's kind of like an ad nauseum deck at that point.
It's a better ad nauseum because you're not losing life equal to the CMC of the card you're drawing.
Mm-hmm.
You're just losing life equal to the Sensei's Top.
Right, yeah, which is fair. Competitive ad naus decks have a total of less than 40 CMC in the entire deck, but at the same time, Bolas' Citadel isn't that shoehorned into a specific strategy. You can just put it in almost any deck and just be good.
I mean, realistically, if you have this and Sensei's Top, you could have a bunch of expensive cards. It doesn't matter.
Right.
You're just going to draw them all for 1 life per card, and you can stop whenever you want.
Exactly, yeah. So
And start again whenever you want to.
Just really powerful artifact.
You know what's a really powerful artifact? Karn, the Great Creator. Activated abilities of artifacts your opponents control cannot be activated. It's
too good.
This is the reason why Mycosynth Lattice has shot up in price.
Yes, it is.
Because Mycosynth Lattice turns everything into an artifact, and if your activated abilities can't be activated, that means you can't tap your lands for mana.
And that kind of puts a stop to a lot of strategies in Magic.
You know what's also ruder? Because his +1 says, until your next turn, up to 1 target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness each equal to its converted mana cost. It does not anywhere in that text say you control.
Oh, man.
So you can go, that land is an artifact. It's a non-creature artifact of 0 CMC. It's a creature now with a power and toughness equal to its CMC, which is 0, and it's dead.
It dies. So as if not tapping them weren't enough, you can then kill all of their lands in slow progress.
And then you may choose an artifact card you own from outside the game, or in exile, reveal that card and put it into your hand. I could see this card showing up in decks where Bolas' Citadel is in the sideboard.
Yeah.
And then you just go,
there it is.
Ugin the Ineffable. Colorless spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. Another card for you Eldrazi commanders. Exile the top card of your library face down and look at it. Create a 2/2 colorless spirit creature token. When that token leaves the battlefield, put the exiled card into your hand. And you can destroy target permanent that's 1 or more colors.
Seems like a solid card.
Ugin's Conjurant is pretty solid. It's like a Phytohydra spirit monk thing.
Yeah, endless one.
Firemind Vessel, I'm disappointed with it. Because it's 4 mana for a tapped 2 mana thing.
It's uncommon. If it were a rare.
Godpharaoh's Statue, 6 mana, makes things cost 2 more.
For your opponents.
For your opponents. It would be slightly better if you had Ugin, so this cost 4. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses 1 life. So it's a clock of sorts. The rest of these, the Mana Geode's okay. It's not bad.
Prismite does some interesting stuff in Standard, but specific stuff. It works really well with Ashnod's Altar.
The lands in this set are pretty good. We have Blast Zone. It enters the battlefield with a charge counter on it, and that's important. You can tap to add colorless. You can pay XX, put X charge counters on it, and you can pay 3, tap, and sacrifice to destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Blast Zone. The fact that it enters with a charge counter is very significant because that means you can't instantly crack it to kill tokens.
Right.
It can never kill tokens.
Unless you remove the charge counter from it. There's that blue-black zombie that can tap, remove a charge counter from something, and draw a card.
No, it's not a charge counter. It's a loyalty counter from a Planeswalker. Or a +1/+1 counter. It
Oh, is it?
specifies. Yeah.
Oh, it's just those two?
Karn's Bastion, 4 mana, proliferate on a land. Yes, please. And it's not legendary. Yes, please, some more.
You can have more, multiple.
All of these are non-legendary. Mobilized District, for the low cost of 0 mana, if you have 4 Planeswalkers, you have a 3/3 citizen.
With Vigilance.
Yeah. Emergence Zone, you can crack it to cast spells this turn as though they had flash. Interplanar Beacon, let me tell you, this card's pretty good.
Doesn't come untapped.
When you cast a Planeswalker spell...
Planeswalker?
When you cast a Planeswalker spell, you gain 1 life. You can tap to add a colorless, or you can pay 1 and tap to add 2 mana of different colors, only to cast Planeswalker spells. Gateway Plaza comes back. Oh, I was sit corrected. Soul Diviner says remove a counter from an artifact, creature, land, or Planeswalker you control. So yeah.
A lot of potential there.
And then we have...
Lands. Very pretty lands.
We have the Mythic Edition, super pretty versions of stuff. I really like the look of Nahiri in this one.
I think my favorite one overall is probably Garrick Apex Predator, and then Gideon Blackblade looks really good too.
Now we have the Planeswalker decks.
Which actually has a relevant card for once, Gideon's Company. It's a 4-mana 3/3. Whenever you gain life, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on Gideon's Company, and you can pay 3 and a white to put a loyalty counter on target Gideon Planeswalker. So what this does is it's essentially a Johnny's Pridemate's big brother. Like I said, life gain decks are already a thing in Standard right now, so this could just be, you know, an even bigger, meaner copy of a Johnny's Pridemate.
Jace Arcane Strategist, though expensive, is actually pretty good because of the synergy between his static ability and his +1.
I'm not familiar with that. I don't remember him.
So whenever you draw your second card each turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, and you can just draw a card with him.
Nice.
So you can guarantee put a counter on something.
That's very interesting.
It's a little off flavor for Jace, but the synergy of the ability is really good.
Yeah.
So that is...
War of the Spark.
War of the Sark. It's a lot. There's a lot going on. Oh, and as our foreshadowing earlier, that's totally Rakdos in the background over here.
Yep.
There's a lot going on in this set. There's so much lore. This is definitely not a kid's meal. This is a full sirloin steak of lore that's going to take a while to chew through. And man, like, again, as I said at the beginning, we didn't know where to begin, and I'm not sure where we can end. Because Bolas is gone. Gideon's gone.
Domri's gone.
Jace kissed a Gorgon. Liliana is, if the lore is correct, AWOL?
Yeah, not really sure what happened to her after that, honestly.
We've got a bunch of Planeswalkers. Dak's dead. Domri's dead. We don't know who else is going to die.
We've got a lot of new faces that we, haven't really met before, like Kasmina, Teo, Davriel, and, we can get excited about where they're going.
I have a creeping theory.
Oh, yeah?
All the Planeswalkers that only tick down can't tick up because they're going to die.
What? That would be interesting.
It would be interesting. But that's my theory. Obviously, I'd have to read the book to confirm. But there's some Planeswalkers that tick down, there's some that tick up, and I'm curious if the ones that tick down are the ones that don't make it. Well, no, that can't be true because we know Dovin's alive and he only ticks down.
That's true. So I think it's just to show that... I don't know if there's any lore significance behind it.
The effect of the Immortal Sun, maybe they're weakened or suppressed from doing their full stuff.
Yeah.
But there's so much here. I can't wait to build this deck because most of the Planeswalkers I need for that deck are uncommon.
Yep.
There's Jace, really. There's Teferi.
If Planeswalker is your favorite permanent type, this is the set for you.
So many walkers.
Man. And there's a lot that are surprisingly relevant. Most of them, if you put them in the right deck, are playable.
There's just so much here. But the pre-release is coming pretty soon. Is it?
It's going to be next week from today's recording. So it's going to be Saturday, April 27th, starting usually at midnight.
Depending on where your pre-release events are transpiring. So, I hope you enjoy your pre-release. Hope you enjoyed the video and our ramblings. we always try to keep the video short, and we always fail with extreme, spectacular, fiery failure.
I mean, even just trying to move through cards quickly, there's just so many.
In this set, I think if it was any other set, where there would be far fewer interesting cards to look at, but this set, there's just so much. If we had taken the time to like hand review every card like we have done in the past, this video would be interminably long.
Very, very long. So, just Final thoughts. Honestly, if you're worried about planeswalkers dying to getting attacked by creatures, dying to Vraska's Contempt, dying to the Elder Spell, I would say just try them. Just there's a lot here. Most every strategy that I can think of in Magic, except maybe like the 1/2 max curve burn decks, it has been represented here. So I would encourage you just to try it, just to see how the Planeswalker does, see if it like is a hindrance to the deck or if it's a boon to it, and just it's anytime a new set comes out, it's a complete.
It's a Wild West.
Yeah, it's a complete Wild West out there. I was trying to say Wonderland, but that didn't quite work. So yeah, I mean the meta was established, but this is going to change the meta, I think, enough to where we can't be really sure about most things.
Like you said before, Esper Control is such an established deck that, yeah, you could build an Esper Control Planeswalker deck, but would it win against the Esper Control deck that's out there? Probably not.
Right. So it's honestly just going to depend.
Which cards make the cut?
Yeah, probably the Dovins, can't be counterable counter spell. There are just certain very good sideboard pieces. So yeah, the already established decks, might not change much, might change just a little bit. Might still be hard to beat, obviously, but I think there's going to be enough new stuff happening that there will emerge strategies that will work against some of the previously established decks.
I'm all about the lore at this point. I don't play Magic as much as I used to, just because of scheduling. I can't make it out to FNM and do as much stuff as I normally would like to, and I mostly play just Commander, as this video has been very evident to prove. So, I'm looking at it from the lore standpoint, and my question is, where do they go from here? Because the Eldrazi are dead and or in the moon.
Right.
Bolas is now nameless and trapped in the meditation realm with his brother.
Yep.
We have one of the Fab Five dead.
And not coming back.
And not coming back, ostensibly.
Hanging out with Elspeth.
Hanging out with Elspeth. And it's like, what happens now? Niv Mizzet is the Guild Pact.
Yep.
He's delivering orders to go hunt Liliana, to go hunt Dovin, to go hunt... there was a third person that was mentioned. But it's kind of a big deal. And Sarkin, like, now that Ugin's gone, is he just fallen in with Niv Mizzet? Because Niv Mizzet is now, with the departure of Ugin and Bolas, Niv Mizzet is the most powerful dragon in lore that we know.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, we would have to see him... I was about to say we'd have to see him pitted against the Dragon Lords of Tarkir, but I don't think that's accurate anymore, because now Niv Mizzet is the living Guild Pact.
Yeah, maybe before he was just a dragon, but he's not just a dragon anymore.
He's a dragon avatar.
So, yeah, and I mean, will they all just go home? Will they go on to different planes? It's honestly really hard to tell. It's kind of open. The story because this chapter has so definitely closed. It's really tough to kind of anticipate what's going to happen next.
And how is Ravnica going to be affected by the very blatant revelation of the existence of the multiverse, right, and the people that can move to and from the various planes, because they were literally invaded by aliens? I mean, the one flavor text says "from beyond the stars," so it's like, are they going to spin it as like they're from another planet, or? But either way, the revelation that they are not alone here,
it's going to turn some heads.
Niv Mizzet now fully... We didn't know if he knew about Planeswalkers before, but he definitely knows about them now.
We're pretty sure Lazav knew, but Lazav knows a lot of stuff.
Lazav knows everything. Don't you, Lazav? He's not available for comment. I'm looking forward to getting my mitts on these Planeswalkers, because there's guaranteed a Planeswalker in every pack.
Yep.
So I'm going to be probably getting a box of this when I can.
And I'm not sure it's tied to any one rarity either. Like I don't remember Wizard saying that it's only going to be uncommon planeswalkers that are in every pack, right? So I mean, there's a chance that you could open up one of the mythic ones, as far as I know.
I mean, realistically, there's by dint of planeswalkers existing at uncommon, I'm pretty sure that satisfies the planeswalker in every pack.
Right. Like
That's probably what's
they'll
happened.
be in there, but
the mythic ones are going to be the harder ones to get. I mean, we have Jace at rare, so the Jace I'm excited about because I've been talking about Atraxa, but I also have my Joyra Weatherlight Captain deck, and he's just a win condition for that deck because that deck will draw itself in a jiffy.
right.
And it means I don't have to put Labman in the deck. I can take Labman out because Labman's not historic, and I can just put this in there.
Yeah, I mean that does seem really good, and honestly, most of my commander decks at this point have some form of green in them. So honestly, the more like ramp or creature-based synergies I can find, the better.
Well, I think we're going to tie it off. This War of the Spark is definitely quite an astounding set. It is a year of finales. We have, as we mentioned, War of the Spark. We have Avengers Endgame. We have Star Wars Rise of Skywalker coming out. And it's going to be a year. But thank you for watching if you've made it this far. I am ThriceRisen.
And I'm Jacob.
And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.